Come on in. It's raining out there. It's good to see you. Welcome to Alive. Hey, so do you remember when we were talking about how just totally fraught and weird money feels? Yeah. I've been stuck on that. There's tea. Do you want tea? Okay. And I'm not just talking about money like dollars and cents. I mean, I'm talking about money as feelings, you know, as safety, belonging, you know, all that stuff that you can't really spreadsheet. The thing is, it seems to me, money's never just money, right? It always represents something. Security, dignity, right? For me, at one point in my life, money represented the opportunity to have an apartment where the shower was not in the kitchen. And for many, many people, it simply represents food for the next day, you know? What does money represent to you? Yeah, here's your tea. I mean, whatever it is, it's always personal. You know, shame or security or something really heavy, like the feeling that you're falling behind. So my question is, if money's carrying all this weight, what is the emotional cost of money? What do you think? Yeah. Huh. Let's go. Okay. All right. So, Reema Khrais is the host of This Is Uncomfortable, a narrative podcast from Marketplace about life and how money messes with it. Reema's podcast has entered its 11th season in May 2025 and currently has over 150 episodes. Prior to joining Marketplace, Reema was selected as a Bringing the World Home Fellow for the International Center for Journalists. In 2018, she traveled to Turkey to report on the economic lives of Syrian refugees. She speaks fluent Arabic. I do not. She served as a Fletcher Fellow covering education policy for North Carolina Public Radio. She reported with NPR as a Joan B. Kroc Fellow. She got her start in audio journalism at WCHL 97.7, the Carolina Connection. Very hard for me not to say it that way. I tried to not say it that way, and yet I said it that way. At the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Oh, and she's here. Okay. Reema, hi. How are you? It's very, very nice to see you. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
This is such a joy for me. This is I know you get this a lot, Steve, but this is such a surreal experience for me. I grew up on you. I watched you. I mean, I was just talking to my sister the other day and I was like, you know who's interviewing me? The guy that we used to watch all the time on the TV. And then she busted out the song We've Got Mail.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. That's maybe the best song.
It's a good one.
That's maybe the best
It's a great song. And now it's just been like playing in my head for the last 48 hours.
What is your sister's name?
Hadil.
What is it?
Hadil.
Hadil? Hi, Hadil. It's me, Steve. Reema's really nice.
She's going to freak out.
Thank you for helping me find all those clues and for getting the mail with me. I really appreciate it. And by the way, I love the name of your podcast. I'm really jealous of it, actually. It's like, that's so good.
We went through so many iterations. It took so long to land on that one. But once we found it, we were like, oh, that's it. That sounds great.
I love it because you can say it so many ways. You can be like, this is uncomfortable. Or you can be like, this is uncomfortable. Like
this is really uncomfortable.
Yeah, this is uncomfortable. Like it speaks to me in very many different ways. But yeah, it's great. You know, like I love the tale of money, and I love focusing on money as something that we each have a specific relation to, and that we each develop stories around. And I'm wondering, like, after 10 years of getting people's stories on how they relate to money, what are there any big commonalities that people share? What are those? What's the Venn diagram?
Yeah, I mean, I've had so many conversations. It's been over 5 years because we do about two seasons
sorry,
each.
not 10 years.
No,
Yeah,
I mean,
10 seasons.
I'll take it though.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really wanted to create a space where people could talk openly about their relationship with money. And, I didn't necessarily want to teach people how to invest or how to draft a budget. I wanted to get at that emotional piece because money is very emotional, right? It's about scarcity and shame and guilt and love. And so I think what I've gathered over the years talking with so many people is that we attach so much meaning to money. And so, I wanted to peel back some of the layers behind the decisions people make with their money, how they feel about it, especially for my generation. I think those emotions are colliding with some really huge forces. People are graduating with like tens of thousands of dollars in student debt that can feel impossible to shake. They're juggling side hustles because they feel like they're falling behind. We're caring for aging parents at the same time when we're trying to hold on to our, build our own sense of stability. And so I think there is this undercurrent of anxiety and comparison and shame. And so, I wanted to ask, what meaning are people assigning to these experiences? How do we carry them and how do we connect with each other through them? And so I think what I've learned, I've learned so many things, but money is usually, I've realized, a stand-in for so much more, for our desires and for our fears. Yes, we want our bank accounts to look different, but what we're really craving maybe is freedom or a sense of safety or a sense of belonging or feeling of worthiness, right? And I think those desires, what I've learned too, don't come out of nowhere. They're shaped by so many things, how we were raised, what we saw growing up, the messages we absorbed from the world around us, when it comes to notions of success or gender roles or class or race and what it means to be secure or valuable. So I think talking openly about all of those things has taught me that yes, learning the nitty-gritty of how to invest or budget is important, but because so many of us are riddled with shame or anxiety, it makes it so much harder for us to build healthy and lasting relationships with money because there's so much to uncover.
Okay. But even when you say that, building a healthy and lasting relationship with money,
it's so hard.
I'm so money averse that I'm like, I don't want to do that. Why would I do that?
Dude, me
I don't
too.
want to do that. I don't want to do that. Isn't it wrong to do that? I have this sort of dichotomy in my head about money, and we'll get into the reasons why, because you were saying a lot of stuff.
I want to hear it. Yeah.
I was like, but I have this dichotomy about money where I'm like, it is evil.
Yeah.
It is evil. Those
That's
who have
real.
it, those who have it are evil. To want it is evil, and to crave it is not indicative of a healthy worldview, and you shouldn't want it and you shouldn't need it. Also, I feel like it is the solution to every problem I have.
Yes.
At the same time. And it is so fraught and it is so dissonant in my brain that I don't even want to talk about it. You know what I mean? I'm like, if someone important says to me, hey man, you really need to, oh God, for me, I mean, we've talked about this, but for me, the thing I want to do least in the world is a financial document. I fly into a rage. I fly into a rage if someone asks me to do a financial document. But I throw my head in the sand. I really do. Yeah. And I don't really do that in other areas of my life,
Me too. I feel like such a hypocrite sometimes because I relate to 99% of what you're saying, and yet I host this show about money. I mean, I've definitely gotten better over the years, but I do have these very avoidant tendencies too. Mm-hmm. And I'm really curious to hear maybe what that story is like for you or what's behind that. But I know for me, I mean, there's so many reasons, but I think, I grew up in a family that was middle class. My parents were nurses, or my dad was a nurse. My mom ended up becoming a nurse later in life. They're very frugal. They're immigrants. Anytime, I asked about finances, I was reassured that we were okay. But I think that silence almost made me more anxious. And I wanted to know, but I got this message that money was something to keep behind closed doors.
Yep.
And And I think that was one of the many threads that shaped my relationship to money today, because as an adult, I caught myself doing a version of that same thing where I'm like avoiding my own numbers. And the story I would tell myself, and I'm curious if you relate to this, is that like, well, future me will handle this when she's wiser, when she's richer, when she's more ready. And it was like this protective story, I think, that kept me from spiraling into like, well, what if I never get to buy a house? Or what if I can't afford childcare one day? But then it also meant that I was avoiding or delaying facing the choices I could have been making at that moment. Because I think, obviously avoidance protects us. It's trying to do its job. It's trying to like keep us from staring directly at those fears. And so, I think, I built a version of myself who I thought was going to be wiser and wealthier and in control. And that's comforting. But it also reinforced the idea that like, present me isn't capable of doing those things. And so I had to really untangle all of those. And I still have to whenever I'm like feeling that resistance to looking and doing things about with my finances.
And this is super common, right? This is super common. This is, like, it's very rare to meet somebody who's like, money, oh yeah, I got that. What do you want to talk about?
I got that, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's so funny. What you described is actually almost verbatim of what I hear from financial therapists all the time, because so I don't know if you're familiar with money scripts. It's this like framework. It's like within the financial therapy community.
Oh, yes.
It's like, money therapists or financial therapists, they'll categorize it in different ways, but oftentimes they'll categorize our relationship with money into these 4 buckets. And one of them is money avoidance. So it's like money avoidance, money worship, money status, and money vigilance.
Ooh.
And and how you described yourself as a money avoider and how I describe myself is exactly how these therapists would characterize it. Like they're the people in our lives who, might ignore financial statements. They might equate money with greed and corruption. And so the tendency is to like avoid. Maybe you're not looking exactly at what you're putting in the shopping cart, or you're ignoring, you maybe have a tendency to overspend. Money vigilant people, they're the ones who you just described don't exist, which seems like they don't sometimes. But they're the ones on top of their finances who are trying to save money when they can. And I think anxiety tends to feed that behavior. And they're usually more private with their finances. And then money worshipers, they tend to think that money is what will ultimately make them happy, that it's the solution to all of their problems. And they're more likely to put things like work ahead of like friends and family. And then the last one, money status seekers, they are more likely to link their self-worth to their bank account. And so they value outward displays of wealth.
Okay, so it happened. The holidays are here. The holiday season is upon us right now. And that can be a little stressful. I don't know about you. I tend to wait to the last minute to shop. But Uncommon Goods takes the stress out of gifting with thousands of unique high-quality finds that you won't see anywhere else. And again, not to stress you out, but you probably shouldn't wait too long because all the good stuff does tend to get scooped up fast. In fact, I saw this one thing on there that I'm definitely getting for my friend's kid. It's like a little handheld video gaming system, but it lets you invent and create your own video game. How cool is that? If I was 9, I would freak out for that. If I was 39, I would freak out for that. It's pretty awesome. They totally do have something for everyone, from moms and dads, kids, teens, book lovers, football fans, foodies, mixologists. If you're a gardener, they do have stuff for everyone. But the cool thing is, when you shop at Uncommon Goods, you're supporting artists and small businesses. And they give $1 back for every purchase to a nonprofit partner of your choice, which is rad, right? They've already raised like $3 million. They're fantastic. So don't wait. Cross those names off your list before the rush. To get 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/alive. That's uncommongoods.com/alive for 15% off. Uncommon Goods. We're all out of the ordinary. I have thoughts. So
Yes, please.
The money avoidant, I think we both get. And I think most people
Totally.
get, right? The money vigilant, I know a few people like that, and they are pretty anxious. You know who you are. And they are
We all know y'all.
Yeah, and they are pretty anxious. Now the last two, I think you said, the money worshiper and the money, what was the last
Money
one?
status seekers.
Assets.
And I think there's different language for these, but yeah.
I feel like those two are siblings or friends or
They
kind
are.
of the same person in a different font in some way. Like
Right.
when I think of a money worshiper, I'm like, oh, this is a person who has missed the point of all philosophical and spiritual wisdom, right? They've not read a book or a good book, and they've not paid attention to anything. I'm sure that is just an oversimplification and me just being highly judgmental. But I just think of greed and avarice and all of these terrible things that, clearly you're missing the point. And the status seeker, I think that's part of what they're craving, right? That's part of what they're trying to attain is the status that they associate with money as it's a function of their greed.
Right. Like maybe they saw people growing up who they really value or admire, and that's what they had, right? And so that's what they're striving towards. And it's, I have the same kind of reflection oftentimes when I think of like status or what is it, the worshipers, the admirers. It's this belief that, oh, once I have enough money, then I'll be able to relax, I'll be content. And I do think it reminds me of a conversation I had with someone many years ago who felt like that. And we actually paired her with a financial therapist to work through some of those feelings. And I think a lot of it was actually connected, surprisingly, to her childhood. And I know that's like often, the links that we go back to. And there are obviously other forces at play. But in her case, she grew up lower class, but then I think had this experience of being in a boarding school where she felt left out and she felt like she didn't belong. And so she even found herself in adulthood, even though she was financially stable, she was like, I need more, I need more, I need more, I need money because I need money. Yeah. And, and that's a very common sentiment and something that I hear a lot from financial therapists and people I've talked to is like to counter that feeling, sometimes you really need to ask yourself like, well, what is it that you're actually in pursuit of?
Yeah.
Like, what is it that's actually meaningful to you? Because money is the tool, right? It's not like what you actually need. The money's the tool to get what you need. And maybe that looks different for everyone. Maybe for you, that's, you want to be in a cabin out in the middle of nowhere and, or maybe for other people, you want to travel. That is what I want, yes. Or maybe for other folks, you want to travel, or maybe you want to be generous and give back to the people you love. But you just really have to be specific about what that is. Otherwise, it can be this maddening chase and it's not fulfilling.
I think you're right, all these, what I was trying to get is that I have all of these prejudices about money. Like I have a lot of assumptions about money, and they're very prejudiced and they're very strange, and they are very informed, I'm sure, by the way that I observed money growing up and even as I was starting my career. But I do think that money, if I get some clarity around it, I do see that money is itself neutral. It is a tool. It is a tool, right? As you say, it is a tool, but it's the value we assign to it that becomes the problem. Like you say it's a placeholder, and that sounds exactly right to me. It is a representation of value, and that's where it kicks open the door within, right? Because then you get to decide what is value, what do I value.
And oftentimes we don't know. Like it takes a lot of intentional work to figure that out. I still feel like I'm figuring that out to some degree, right? Like,
oh, for sure.
Because you really have to, I mean, it's like with anything in life, you really have to differentiate what it is that you believe and what is important to you from what society and what your family says is important to you. Because, I'm always surprised by how little we actually understand our own relationship with money because, like I've said, so much of how we handle it is driven by our unconscious beliefs that lead to those scripts, right? Because it's like comes down to the messages that we internalized when we were younger, from how we saw our families handle money, how our communities talked about the rich or the poor. Because we connect emotions to money before we even have words to describe those emotions, and then we carry those associations with us throughout adulthood, and then they turn into beliefs that shape our relationship to money. And not even that, like sometimes you can have experiences, I think, in adulthood, right, that end up shaping your relationship to money. I can give an example. I always think of this couple that I talked to many years ago where she, the woman, was really anxious about being the one in control of the finances. She was like, I need to be the one who's handling everything. And her husband or my partner at the time felt really infantilized. He was like, I don't feel like I have any power in this situation. And it was very insulting to him. And once we like stripped back the layers, she explained how in her previous marriage, she let her husband control all of the finances, and he ended up committing what financial therapists will call financial infidelity, which is he just didn't share with her that they were actually underwater. He lied to her about being in school when he really wasn't, whatever. There was just a lot of betrayal involved. And that left this really painful memory, and it made her like recoil whenever it came to talking about money and finances with future partners. And so she was showing up in this relationship as someone who was hurt and someone who didn't want to repeat those past patterns. And so I think oftentimes I'm getting into territory of like how to deal with money in relationships, but oftentimes you really do want to meet the person with where they're at, with the baggage that they have, with the history that they have. And sometimes that might look unfair on the surface. But I think sometimes you need to work with where someone is, and then you can build the trust, and it can evolve over time.
Yeah.
So many factors influence how we show up with our money.
I do think, certainly in my lived experience, but I think it's common in people I talk to, my friends, that a lot of it goes back to, as you say, what you saw as a kid. Like money's in the house with you. Like how the relationship, the family relationship to money. I mean, I remember. Yeah.
I'm curious to hear about your relationship.
Well, I just knew that when we were really little, we kind of had some, and then we didn't have any. Right. And then it was, and then it was stressful, but it wasn't really expressed. It was kind of a background problem.
Yeah.
It was like the weather. It was in the air, and I knew that it caused my father great stress, and I knew that it was a problem, right? Yeah. But at the same time, I grew up like hella Catholic, and the poor were blessed. It was almost like you want to be poor, like the poor are the good ones. It's almost like you're not good.
Interesting.
You're not good unless you're poor. You can't even have all the heaven stuff if you're a rich person. If you're a rich person, it's like the worst thing you could be. I remember thinking that at the same time.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
why you feel the way you do today.
And then when I was, when I was in high school, and when I first moved to New York, there was the punk rock pose of everything, like the ethos of you can't sell out. You just can't sell out. Whatever you do, you gotta just keep your integrity, and eat Chef Boyardee, bro. That's what this is, man. And
don't trust the institutions or government.
And so I was always a little weirded out. I mean, when I first started doing kids TV, believe me, there was no money.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. No, we weren't. That I kind of like that. I mean, we were doing that show for love for the first many seasons. And eventually it got way better. It got fair. But at first, there wasn't. But I was worried about money in that sense, because I was like, aren't I worth more money to the show? Am I being undervalued? What is my value? Right. Do people not understand my value? I'm deeply offended by this. Yeah, I was a kid. I was like 22 or something. So I was already developing these kind of weird valuations based on the amount of money I was receiving or had or could tell people I had or could point to. And then now that I'm older, I do have a parent in assisted living, and for the first time in my life, I worry about money. I think about it all the time. Like, is there going to be enough money for this? Is there going to be enough money for that? Is there going to be enough money for this? Because again, it's a different valuation of money. At this stage in my life, I'm like, I just want to make sure there's enough to care for this thing, So it really does morph, and like you said, it's a placeholder, right? It's a placeholder. Right. It's a placeholder, for your moral standing in the world, in the eyes of God. It is a placeholder. It is a placeholder for how punk rock you actually are. It is a placeholder for the degree to which a cable network values your contribution, and it's a placeholder for how well you're caring for your parent. It can be all of these things,
Right. It's a placeholder. It's a mirror. It reflects back, I think, the deeper things that are important to us, our values, our insecurities, our family histories. And that's why I think, oftentimes when part of the reason why we call the show This Is Uncomfortable is because folks are often talking in different languages when they're talking about money, right?
Yeah.
They're not really, like, one person might be speaking a language of protection and fear, and the other person's speaking a language of like pragmatism or avoidance. And I think until you like really translate what money or what it means to each person, then oftentimes you're just talking past each other in intimate and interpersonal relationships.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think sometimes those conflicts spiral, because you can't resolve them by like swapping spreadsheets. Because what's at stake isn't math. It's like often meaning, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
I have so many questions going through my head because now I'm curious about your background a little bit more. But I guess the point is that you're supposed to ask me questions. So.
I am the podcast host today. What I'm learning in talking to you and talking to a few other people about money is that there's an emotional literacy that people need to have around particularly this subject, which is maybe a little counterintuitive, but I've always wondered this, like, do I have to know the jargon? Like, I don't know. Yeah. I don't understand what people are talking about when they talk about specific money thing. And to me, that always feels, I suspect that it's by design.
Right.
They make money really hard to know. They make it inscrutable and opaque and weird so that only the people who know about it can have the money, because the money worshipers are evil people and they want all of it and they want to keep it all from like the money averse people. And I developed these conspiracies around it, and like, and then I feel the shame because like, well, I don't get it. I don't understand the difference between my SEP and my whatever. And I really don't understand the market, and I really don't get what crypto is. And, and should we, I'm not asking you to like explain money to me so much as do you have a sense of like what a healthy level of financial literacy is on a specific level?
That's a good question. I do think, going back to the first thing that you said, that emotional literacy is very important, because emotional literacy, I do think it can be a form of financial literacy, right? Like, I'm not a psychologist, but talking with so many people over the years, I do see how our emotions drive our financial behavior. So it's like, whether we're impulse buying or avoiding our bank account because we don't like what it might say about us, those aren't rational choices. They're emotional ones. We're making decisions based on fear and loss aversion and short-term relief, right? So I do think, to some degree, the practical side of financial literacy, like budgeting, saving, investing, only works if it's built on emotional awareness. I remember there was a period a few years ago where I was like, I felt very similar to you, and I still do to some degree, where I'm like, I don't know all these things. Should I know the latest about crypto and this and that? And then I had to work through those emotions, and eventually I sat down with myself and I was like, okay, Reema, just put it on your calendar. Just like literally once a week. Just say like 15 minutes. Start small. Yep. Watch a YouTube video, like read a book, figure out how to invest, figure out how to budget. And I do think, I was just talking with a professor the other day about this, because I was doing this episode about how in my early 20s, I had these retirement accounts that I didn't really like. I never really tracked them. I didn't feel like I wasn't on top of it. They just kind of existed. Yep. And now that I'm 35, I'm like, I should actually figure out what the hell happened to those accounts, see how much money I have, roll them over.
Yes.
And it felt like such a annoying and burdensome task that I kept putting off. And I got on the phone with this with a woman named Katie Milkman. She's a psychologist, behavioral psychologist. And I was like, what's wrong with me? Like, why is it so hard for me to do this very simple financial task that I know will help me?
Yeah.
And she was like, and this actually made me feel better. She was like, Reema, like our brains aren't wired to do these things. Like we really have to like fool ourselves to some extent in order to do the things we know we should do but don't want to do. And so the strategies that work are often about like making change feel easier and rewarding at the moment. And so she was like, pair something you should do with something you want to do. This is like
great advice.
One-on-one stuff, but it works, right? It works. And so like, she's like, do it with a friend or reward yourself. Or she was even like, you can create a punishment, which I'm still thinking about till this day. She was talking about this website where you can sign up. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of these kinds of companies where you sign up and you put a goal, you say you're going to do it by this date, and you give it your credit card information. And if you don't do it, it'll donate a portion of your money to like a cause.
Brilliant.
It's brutal. Yeah, to a cause that you're against.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God, really?
That's so punitive.
That would work on me.
So you like, yeah, it would work on me too.
What is that called?
I think it was called Stick, the one website she told me about, like STICKK.
That is so smart. That's going to work on me. So what do you think about this? I talk to people. I have a lot of friends who are millennials, and there's sort of this expectation that there's this ginormous wealth transfer that is nigh, right? You hear about it. This like, I don't know, 50, 70 billion dollar wealth transfer that's about to happen, or $1 trillion wealth transfer that's about to happen. But then I read that most of it is not going to go to the people who are shackled with insane debt, and that it's all hype. What is your sense of that? What are you hearing?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think because there is, I think, this interesting tension. I was just reading the other day, there was this article about how overall millennials' net worth actually exceeds expectations when you compare it to like previous generations at similar ages. Yeah. Which on the face of it, you're like, oh, great, we're doing great. But there is a significant gap, as you're saying, between like those who are well off and those who aren't. The people who are struggling to build wealth are the people who have large student debt payments, who are burdened with extraordinary healthcare costs, the ones who can't afford to buy a house. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm in that category, to be honest. I'm renting. I don't know if I'll be able to afford childcare when hopefully I have a kid one day. I just don't know what that'll look like, right, in terms of reorganizing my finances. And so I think there is a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of generational angst. And I think a lot of it has to do with, or some of it has to do with the gap between, I think, what so many of us were promised, right, versus what we actually got. I do think so many of us came of age during the Great Recession and, graduated into a labor market where wages had been stagnant. On top of that, like all the things you hear, right? And so, going through these historic moments has conditioned, at least I'm speaking for myself, to be extra wary that nothing is guaranteed. So you better hold on to what you have, I
feel like particularly millennials were sold the concept of debt as a ticket. It's the ticket to the club. It's the ticket to school, to adulthood, to a house, freedom, potentially a family. But then you don't get into the club, but you do have the debt. And I feel for that, because that sucks, right? Because that is essentially a corruption of the American dream as I understood it. I have a really good friend the other day who said the new American dream is being hit by a city bus and then hoping that you don't die. Oh, no. But you don't die. But you can sue.
Get a huge windfall.
That's right. It's like, that's the new American dream. And I'm like, that's funny and so sad.
That's so dark. So dark.
He's a dark guy. But yeah, I was like, that's kind of right.
I'd be lying if I said that thought. I didn't have a fleeting thought that sounded similar to that, where I'm like, well, maybe I'll get a huge windfall later in life through some unfortunate, not really, but
a series of unfortunate events.
Not really, but I do think there is this like belief that I've held on to, and I know so many of my friends also feel, which is that it's like, I think this optimism bias that we have of like, well, maybe something like it will change our circumstances. And because like the current reality doesn't feel like it's going to get us to where we want to go. And so, or I just think a lot of us are also like quietly adjusting what we once considered the traditional markers of success, right? It's not about the house and the 2 cars and the 2.5 kids anymore. It's about having maybe like sort of what I was saying earlier, like the ability to travel or rent a really nice apartment or having maybe like freedom in your work life, even though the American dream looms large, I don't think it reflects how so many of us are actually living, that, a lot of us are still relying, for example, on family support well into adulthood, or, we're not fitting the narratives, or maybe we're still living with our parents or whatever it might be. But I think it's also okay. Like a lot of these narratives are outdated or exclusionary, and don't take into consideration, like I was saying earlier, like they weren't always designed with everyone in mind, right? Because I do think financial advice assumes a baseline of privilege, and it can ignore the ways capitalism or caregiving responsibilities or generational wealth, how that can shape what's possible.
Tell me more about that, because that sounds true to me. Financial advice, financial literacy, the things that we assume are financial wisdom, assume a certain degree of privilege, or they assume that you've got a certain amount of money, right? So all of the advice and wisdom that we get is like, this is what you do with your big chunk of money, right? And there's not enough people saying, this is what you do to live with dignity with what you have, right? There's not enough of that. Why do you think that is?
I mean, I think like so much of our curriculums and knowledge and so much of our education, rather, was designed for a profile that is exclusionary, right? For like the white male, or for groups that they're not designed with groups that are marginalized in mind.
Correct.
And I also think, what you just said sparked a memory that I have of talking with someone who there was this conversation I had many years ago with a woman who, her brother died of an overdose. And when she was like a kid, he was like in his 20s. And this was like a larger story, which I can get into if you're interested, but it was about how she was trying to find out where he had been buried, because when he died, her family wasn't able to afford a burial. And so the local government took care of it. Anyway, so she described how her brother never really had a chance. Like, he was born into, his struggle with addiction traced back to his turbulent childhood, to his mother's alcoholism, to the lack of support. And so I remember she had this phrase where she was like, his fate felt determined. And it was like the ball of inequity was rolling long before he was born.
Yeah. Ooh, that's very well said.
Yeah, that always stuck with me. And I do think, generally speaking, we, like I said, financial advice assumes a baseline of privilege, and without taking into consideration the fact that so many of us don't have the kind of generational wealth that others are able to lean on, even in like the smallest of ways, right? I have friends who are able to afford the home because maybe their parents gave them that $50,000 down payment that they needed, or, a portion of the down payment that they needed. Or like, it's just, we are not all starting in the same place. We all have different responsibilities, different expectations from our families. My parents growing up, they would give like a good portion of their income every month to our family abroad. And that was just a given, right? That was just like an obligation that they felt. It goes back to what I was saying too, which is that like, you really have to design your financial life based on what is important to you.
Well, that goes back to the emotional literacy associated with money, which I'm seeing from talking to you is more and more important. I'm seeing that there really can't be financial literacy without an emotional literacy about money. Like it really is foundational to that. And also how you were saying before about how your valuations about what success is can change. Valuations about, or at least your relationship to the concept of value, it can change and does change.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what about you? Like, can you talk about money with your friends? Like, is that, are you better at that than most people, or,
I think I've gotten better for sure.
Yeah, I bet you are.
There are times where I'm like, oh, am I being a little too much? Because I don't hesitate as much to ask someone how much their rent is or how much they're making.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure I've made some people uncomfortable. I try to obviously pick up on social cues and not push people, but
Yeah.
but I feel a lot less shame in terms of sharing details of my financial life. And so it's, I, d- like, it's so cheesy, but I really do feel like talking with so many people, I'm like, oh, we're all the same.
Yeah.
Like, we're just like all so interconnected. And like, we're all chasing and longing the same things. We all want to feel cared. We want to feel like we belong. And so, like, part of me, I'm not focusing so much on the specific numbers I'm sharing with my friends or how, whenever it comes up, I'm really just sharing the feeling behind that of like, oh, I want to feel like I'm being paid what I'm worth in the workplace, or I really want to have enough money so that I can if I afford childcare one day, right? So I'm more focused on that part of the conversation than what those numbers might say about me, right?
I think that's the big old gift of listening, deep listening, which you're obviously very good at, is you start to see the same. You start to see, oh, I see you and me, and I see me and you, and that's where compassion starts, and that's where, empathy begins, and that's where all the good stuff happens. And you're obviously really, really good at that. I've heard you talk about, just kind of anecdotally, something everybody can relate to. But that is so uncomfortable, and also illustrative is the bill, is the getting of the bill, the receiving of the bill for the shared food at the restaurant. That, I think, is kind of a little microcosm of how most people feel. It just brings everything to bear, because one person might be like,
Right. Who's going to pay?
I will pay. I want to show off and show that I will pay for the drinks.
Right.
And another person's like, dude, if you ask me to split this bill, I'm going to come over and kick you in the throat, because you had you had 9 appetizers and 5 glasses of wine, and I had French fries. And where is the justice?
I'm not paying $70.
I'm on that guy's team, by the way, but it just brings everything up. And one person might be like, really upset that they don't want to say that we shouldn't split the bill. And one person might be feel awkward about saying I can cover it or whatever. And even just talking about that scenario, I'm like, that's gross.
So you're the person on the table who's like,
I'm the person on the table.
We can figure it out later. Or like,
I'm either like offering to pay, but not to show off, but just be like, yeah, let's make this go away.
Right. Just to be like, let's get this problem away.
Or I'm like, whatever you think, man, we'll just split it. Whatever's easiest, because this is how my personality works. Whatever will cause the least amount of stress for everyone.
We're very similar. I feel the same way.
I'm getting that. Yeah. I think the last thing I'd like to kind of cover is, you have talked to a lot of diverse people. You've talked to a lot of people about this fluctuating stand-in for our own self-worth. And I'm wondering how that's different across cultures, how you've found that to be different across gender, across financial station that you're born into. Like, what are some of the big differences you've seen?
Oof, that's a hard question, because I do think so much of it is unique. But oh man, I mean, I'm like scanning through all of the different stories and all the different people I've talked to over the years, and I really feel like so much of it is individual, because I'm constantly surprised by how people are interpreting their financial story. I've talked with people who were born into a lot of generational wealth and want nothing to do with the money. They're disgusted by it, and they're actively giving it away. Yeah, I talked with this one woman who got into fights, these explosive fights with her dad about it, because he was like, no, this is like, you're basically rejecting our family history by rejecting this money. This is, it's more than just money. And she was like, no, it ties back to, slavery and oil, and I don't want anything to do with this money.
That's interesting.
But then I've talked with other people who, like her dad, have a lot of pride in how, in their family name, or they feel a lot of shame. Like they're prideful about it, but they don't want to necessarily talk about it with their friends in terms of, not being burdened with student debt. And so they lie about it, right? And so I want to say that there are these like big differences I've noticed across gender. And gender is a big one, obviously. I have noticed, generally speaking, women, especially in the workplace, are obviously less likely to ask for what they're worth. And, but there are always very surprising ways that people respond. Like, I've talked with a lot of people who come from low-income backgrounds, and that's translated into a lot of anxiety in adulthood. But then I've talked with other people, and they have like a more avoidant tendency with it. And so it really reflects their individual experiences.
That's really interesting to me that, you have interviewed so many people from so many different backgrounds, and yet each of the stories, each person's relationship to money is their own, and we all have our own. And it can be
so arbitrary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. It can be so, I talked with this one woman who was getting into these big fights with her wife because they wanted to start a family. And she was like, no, we can't start a family until we are making $150,000 as a baseline. And she was like, what? Where did that number come from? And it was just like a number that she kind of like held on to when she was like 10 years old or something like that, and just never let it go.
Yep.
And so it can be so irrational, but she was like, no, that was the number I associated with like, being well off when I was younger, and that's what we need. And even though we're only making 110 or 105, no, we need to make 115.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just, it's so irrational.
I do that
you do?
too. Yeah.
In what sense?
I've always in my life, I've had these goalposts. It's like, okay, you're not safe.
Right.
Wow. I'm just realizing right now, that is the word. That is the word for me. Safe. Safety. Right? Yeah. Is mom safe? Is this safe? Am I going to be like? Are people safe? That's a word for me. Financial safety is a thing, but I've always associated numbers with that. Right? And I wonder where that comes from.
I know. It could be so. It's probably an irrational number. And I think going back to what I was saying, that's why it is probably like really important to be like, okay, what number do I actually need to achieve based on like what it is that I want in life, as opposed to just chasing endlessly towards a number. But that's real. I think about this too all the time, where I'm like, okay, what is the number? What is the moment that I'm going to feel safe? And I hear that a lot from people that I talk to. And something I always go back to, and it sounds depressing on the face of it, but it can also be comforting. Do you know who Pema Chödrön is?
Oh my gosh.
She's like an American Buddhist. Yeah.
Pema, she saved my life. Yeah. When Things Fall Apart, ladies and gentlemen, When
Things Fall Apart, yes.
That is a book.
I was just... I was like, there's a likelihood that Steve will resonate with this. I feel like we're on the same wavelength.
That book changed my life. That's legit, by the way.
No, same, honestly. It really left an imprint on me. And I was like rereading it recently. And so that's why it's probably in my head right now. But there was like this sentiment that she shared, because I was also reading it. It sounds like you were reading it during a tough moment in your life.
We all do, right? Yeah.
We all do, right? That's why you pick it up. It's called When Things Fall Apart. Yeah. So I was reading it during a tough moment when I was grieving, and there was this idea in there about how life is groundless, and that's not necessarily a problem. We're all craving and striving for certainty and safety and control. And she was like, groundlessness that's actually the natural state of things. And when we stop resisting that, when we stop resisting the impermanence, then life becomes more workable, essentially. And that's something I think about a lot, how like some of the deepest illusions we have are that we can find solid ground, that if we plan hard enough, that if we save enough, if we control every variable, then maybe we'll hold on to our jobs. Maybe the relationships won't look different. Maybe, we'll have all the things, but everything is always shifting, right? Like our relationships, our job, our health, the economy. And so, I think that groundlessness isn't, like I was saying earlier, it's not the personal failure. It's the reality. And I think something I try to hold on to is that we cling on to certainty like it's possible, but if we can accept that groundlessness is the baseline, then life feels a little bit more manageable. And of course, there are other,
You totally got that book.
I got it. I mean, I also, underlined and wrote down a lot of things, and it really.
I wish I was upstairs, because my copy of that book, by the way, was called "When Things Fall Apart" by Pema Chödrön, and it's that's a good one. And obviously, I mean, she's a Buddhist, and so the impermanence and all that is baked in, but it's also about, a lot of that is about not great. Like you're talking about, nothing is fixed, nothing is permanent. And that relates very directly to money and the concept of money, the concept of attaining and getting and clinging to this idea and amassing something for the future, for a safety in the future, which is still not insured,
And that doesn't mean giving up on our goals or structure, but I think it just means like not holding on to them so tightly and not pinning your sense of security or your self-worth on a fixed outcome, on a job title or on a salary or a relationship. Because, you build security in your own capacity, I think, to adapt. Yeah. Dude, this is making me feel like I need to have you on my show, because I have so many questions.
Yeah, I was going to say, I would be happy to be on your show, Reema. You're such a good hang.
That'd be amazing.
You're so cool. And all right, I think we've talked about everything I wanted to talk about. But you're amazing. And you're wonderful.
This was so fun.
Yeah, I'm gonna read Pema Chödrön tonight. And thank you for coming, and thank you for
having me.
I thought this was going to be about financial literacy, but I think it was about emotional literacy, and that's way cooler. So thank you so much.
I had a lot of fun.
Thank you, Reema Khrais.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Bye.
Appreciate it. Bye.
Well, that was great. Reema's great. Love Reema. Okay. So I wrote just a few things down real quick. The first thing I wrote down is that money is a tool, right? Yeah. It's essentially neutral. It is a means to an end, not the thing itself. And where we kind of get into trouble is when we assign all these other things to it, which brings me to the second thing. Money is a stand-in. Right. Money is a stand-in for value, how we value our lives, how we value our experiences, our relationships, how we value ourselves. And the last thing I wrote is that there really can't be financial literacy without accompanying emotional literacy, which makes sense, because no matter what it is we're trying to do with money, our relationship to it is fundamentally emotional, right? At least, I don't know, at least that's how it feels to me. What do you think? Yeah. Yes. You know what? Let's go outside. I think it stopped raining. It did. Okay. So, we ask money to do a lot, right? We ask it to give us security, identity, safety, even permanence, as if it's going to somehow save us from all that groundlessness that Reema was talking about. But I think she's right. I think life is always changing, like the weather. What would we value if we stopped asking money to do the job of making us whole? What do you think? Listen, I'm so glad you came by today. I love doing this. This is great. It really is. Thank you for being here. You look great. Check out the mist on that mountain. Alive with Steve Burns is a Lemonada Media original. If you haven't subscribed to Lemonada Premium yet, now's the perfect time. You can listen to the show completely ad-free, plus you'll unlock exclusive bonus content from me as I reflect on this episode. Just press subscribe on Apple Podcasts, head to lemonadapremium.com to subscribe on any other app, or listen ad-free on Amazon Music with your Prime membership. That's lemonadapremium.com. Alive is hosted by me, Steve Burns, and produced by Jeremy Slutskin. Our editor is Christopher Champion Morgan. Our associate producer is Akshaz Tharabailu. Audio engineering by James Sparber. Lemonada's SVP of weekly programming is Steve Nelson. Executive producers are Jessica Cordova-Kramer, Stephanie Whittles-Wax, and me. We'll see you next week. And you look great, by the way.